The rain pounded against the windshield as I gripped the steering wheel of my old Chevy truck. The wipers struggled to keep up, creating a hypnotic rhythm that matched the heaviness in my chest. After 42 years of building my construction company from nothing into an empire, today was the day I would face my son's ultimatum. Marcus had called a week ago with that tone in his voice, impatient, entitled, demanding what he believed was rightfully his. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. Dad, I need my inheritance now, he had said, not even bothering with hello. I'm 35, and I'm tired of waiting for you to hand over what's eventually going to be mine anyway. The words had cut deeper than any construction accident I'd ever suffered. His mother, my beloved Eleanor, had been gone for 5 years, and in that time, Marcus had gradually transformed from the thoughtful boy we raised into someone I barely recognized. I pulled into the parking lot of Hartwell & Sons, the company that had been my life's work. The massive sign displayed proudly against the backdrop of downtown Portland made my chest swell with pride even now. I'd started with a single hammer and a beat-up pickup truck, taking any job that would pay the bills. Now we developed commercial properties across 3 states, employed over 200 people, and had a reputation for quality that made our services the most sought after in the Pacific Northwest. The office lobby was quiet as I made my way to the conference room. Samantha, my executive assistant for the past 15 years, gave me a sympathetic smile. She knew what today was about. Everybody did. Word travels fast in a family business. "He's already in there," she said softly, "with his attorney." I nodded, squared my shoulders, and pushed open the heavy oak door. Marcus sat at the far end of the polished conference table, dressed in an expensive suit I knew I had paid for. Beside him was a young woman with sharp eyes and a sharper pantsuit, folders spread meticulously before her. My son didn't stand when I entered. He didn't even smile. "Let's make this quick," he said. "I have a flight to catch this afternoon." I took my time settling into my chair, observing the man my son had become. His face had hardened over the years. Lines of discontent etched around his mouth, where laughter lines should have been. Eleanor would have been heartbroken to see him this way. "Hello to you too, son," I said, keeping my voice steady. "I see you've brought reinforcements." "This is Vanessa Winters," he replied, not acknowledging my subtle rebuke. "She's here to make sure everything proceeds legally and efficiently." "I'm James Peterson," my own attorney said as he entered behind me. "I believe we spoke on the phone, Ms. Winters." The tension in the room was thick enough to cut with a saw. I pulled out a folder of my own and placed it on the table, my weathered hands, a stark contrast to the pristine paper inside. "You asked for your inheritance early," I said, looking directly at Marcus. "I've spent the past week considering your request." Marcus leaned forward, unable to hide his eagerness. And I've decided to give you what you're asking for." Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The surprise on his face was almost worth the pain this decision had caused me. He clearly hadn't expected me to agree so readily. His attorney also seemed taken aback, shuffling her papers as if searching for a trap. "You're serious?" Marcus asked, suspicion replacing his initial shock. "Completely," I replied, sliding the folder toward him. "Inside, you'll find the details of your inheritance, exactly as it would have been distributed upon my death, just accelerated to today." What Marcus didn't know, what he had never bothered to learn, was that I had restructured everything 5 years ago, shortly after Eleanor passed. My wife had seen something in our son that I had been blind to, a sense of entitlement that had grown with each achievement handed to him rather than earned. "Open it," I said quietly. His attorney reached for the folder first, but Marcus snatched it before she could touch it. He flipped it open, scanning the first page. Then the second, his expression shifting from expectant to confused. "What is this?" he demanded, waving the paper. $500,000? That's it?" I nodded calmly. "That's the cash portion of your inheritance, yes. But the company, the properties," he sputtered, flipping frantically through the pages. "Where's my stake in Hartwell & Sons? Where are the real estate holdings?" I leaned back in my chair, the weight of 42 years of business decisions sitting comfortably on my shoulders. "There is no stake in the company for you, Marcus. There never was." The color drained from his face. That's impossible. I'm your only son, your only child. Who else would get the company? The employees? I replied simply. 5 years ago, I converted Hartwell & Sons to an employee-owned enterprise. Every person who works there now owns a piece of it, proportional to their years of service. The company you assumed would be handed to you has actually been owned by the people who built it alongside me. Marcus slammed his fist on the table, causing his attorney to flinch. You can't do this. This company is my birthright. Birthright? I repeated, the word feeling foreign on my tongue. No, son. A birthright is something you're entitled to simply by being born. This company wasn't handed to me. I built it through decades of sacrifice, risk, and hard work. What made you think you deserved to own something you never helped create? The silence that followed was deafening. Marcus stared at me with a mixture of rage and disbelief that I had never seen directed at me before, not even during his rebellious teenage years. His attorney cleared her throat. Mr. Hartwell, surely there's been some misunderstanding. Your son has been operating under the assumption that there's no misunderstanding, I interrupted gently. Marcus has been operating under assumptions, yes, but they were his own. I never promised him the company. In fact, I've invited him to join the business at entry-level positions multiple times over the years. He always declined, saying the work was beneath him. Marcus's face flushed with anger. You expected me to start at the bottom? I have an MBA from Wharton. Yes, which I paid for, I reminded him, along with your condo, your car, and every other luxury you've enjoyed. I never denied you anything, Marcus, but ownership of Hartwell & Sons isn't something that can be given. It's something that must be earned. I stood up and walked to the window looking out at the Portland skyline. The rain had stopped, and weak sunlight was beginning to break through the clouds. It felt symbolic somehow. The $500,000 is yours, I continued without turning around. No strings attached. What you do with it is entirely up to you. Invest it wisely, and it could set you up for life. Waste it, and you'll learn a valuable lesson about the true worth of money. When I finally turned back to face my son, I was surprised to see tears in his eyes. Not of sadness, but of bitter fury. He stood abruptly, knocking his chair backward. You'll regret this, he hissed. When you're old and alone, don't expect me to be there for you. The words stung, but I had anticipated them. I won't be alone, Marcus. I have a family of 200 people who work alongside me every day, who've poured their hearts into building something meaningful. Can you say the same? His attorney was hastily gathering her papers, clearly uncomfortable with the turn the meeting had taken. Mr. Hartwell, I strongly suggest we continue this discussion after everyone has had a chance to cool down. There's nothing more to discuss, Marcus snapped, snatching the folder from the table. He's made his decision, and so have I. As he stormed toward the door, I called after him. Marcus, wait! He paused, his hand on the doorknob, not bothering to look back. The money isn't your full inheritance, I said quietly. There's something else. Something far more valuable. Now he turned, suspicion and the faintest glimmer of hope battling across his features. What? A choice, I replied. You can take that check and walk away, never looking back. Or you can tear it up, walk through those doors downstairs, put on a hard hat, and start learning this business from the ground up, the way I did, the way every successful person here did. In 5 years, if you put in the work, you could own more of this company than anyone except me. For a brief moment, something flickered in his eyes, a flash of the thoughtful boy I'd raised. Then it was gone, replaced by the hard mask of entitlement that had become his default expression. Keep your charity, he spat. I don't need your handouts or your lectures. The door slammed behind him with such force that the framed company photographs on the wall rattled. His attorney murmured an awkward apology before hurrying after him. James, my attorney and friend of 20 years, waited until their footsteps receded down the hallway before speaking. That went about as well as we expected. I sank back into my chair, suddenly feeling every one of my 67 years. I had to do it, James. If I'd given him the company, he would have run it into the ground within 5 years. All those families who depend on Hartwell & Sons for their livelihoods, I couldn't do that to them. You did the right thing, James assured me, gathering his own papers. The question is, what will Marcus do now? I gazed out at the city spread below us. The city where I'd built my dreams from nothing but determination and grit. That's entirely up to him. For the first time in his life, Marcus will have to make his own way. As the afternoon stretched into evening, I remained in my office, watching the sunset paint the Portland skyline in hues of orange and gold. My phone remained silent. No calls from Marcus, no angry texts, no threatened legal action. Just silence. Samantha knocked softly before entering with a cup of coffee. "You should go home, boss. It's getting late." "In a minute," I promised, accepting the steaming mug gratefully. "Just wrapping up some thoughts." She hesitated in the doorway. "For what it's worth, everyone here thinks you did the right thing. We're all proud to own a piece of what you built." Her words warmed me more than the coffee. "Thank you, Sam. That means more than you know." After she left, I opened the bottom drawer of my desk and pulled out a framed photograph. Eleanor holding 3-year-old Marcus on her lap, both of them laughing as I tickled our son's belly. We had been so happy then, so full of dreams for the future. "I hope I did right by him, Ellie," I whispered to the smiling face of my wife. Sometimes the hardest gift to give is the one that doesn't feel like a gift at all. I tucked the photo back into the drawer and gathered my things. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new projects, new opportunities to build something lasting. Whether Marcus would eventually be part of that future remained to be seen. The door I had offered him would remain open, not to ownership handed on a silver platter, but to the chance to earn his place in the legacy I had created. As I locked the office behind me, I couldn't help but wonder what my son was doing at that very moment. Was he booking a flight to some exotic location to nurse his wounded pride? Was he plotting revenge? Or was there a chance, however slim, that he was reconsidering my offer? Only time would tell. And for the first time in decades, I found myself looking forward to tomorrow's sunrise with a strange mixture of sadness and hope. The first rays of morning sunlight filtered through the blinds of my bedroom window, casting long shadows across the hardwood floor. It had been 3 months since that fateful meeting with Marcus. 3 months of silence that spoke volumes. I'd thrown myself into work with renewed vigor, overseeing new projects and mentoring younger employees who showed promise and hunger, the kind of hunger I'd always hoped to see in my son. My morning routine remained unchanged. Coffee at the kitchen counter, the newspaper spread before me, the empty chair across from mine a constant reminder of Eleanor's absence. But today, something felt different. Perhaps it was the headline in the business section. Hartwell & Sons wins bid for downtown revitalization project. Our biggest contract yet, one that would secure jobs for our workers for the next 3 years. The doorbell rang as I was rinsing my coffee cup. When I opened the door, I found Samantha standing on my porch, an unusual occurrence on a Saturday morning. "Sorry to bother you at home, Frank," she said, her expression a mixture of concern and hesitation. "But I thought you should see this right away." She handed me a glossy brochure with an embossed logo, Pinnacle Developments. Beneath it, in smaller lettering, Marcus Hartwell, founder and CEO. My heart skipped a beat as I flipped through the pages. Professional photographs showcased an architectural design for a commercial complex, not unlike our own signature style. The final page featured my son in a tailored suit, looking directly at the camera with a confidence that bordered on defiance. "When did this arrive?" I asked, my voice steadier than I felt. "Yesterday afternoon, after you'd left." It was addressed to the company, not to you specifically. Samantha hesitated. "There's more. He's bidding against us for the Riverside project." The Riverside project, a multi-million-dollar mixed-use development that would transform the city's waterfront. We'd been working on our proposal for months, pulling together our best designers, cost analysts, and sustainability experts. "I see," I said simply, inviting her inside. "Coffee?" "I shouldn't stay," she replied, checking her watch. "I'm meeting with the team in an hour to discuss our final presentation. I just thought you should know, before I heard it elsewhere." I finished for her. "Thank you, Sam. I appreciate your loyalty." After she left, I sat in my study, the brochure open on my desk. My son had taken his inheritance and immediately positioned himself as my competitor. I couldn't decide whether to feel proud of his initiative or wounded by his clear intent to prove himself by trying to beat me at my own game. My phone rang, displaying a number I didn't recognize. "Frank Hartwell," I answered. "Mr. Hartwell, this is Diana Chen from the Portland Business Journal. I was hoping to get your comment on your son's new venture, Pinnacle developments, particularly regarding the upcoming competition for the Riverside project. News traveled fast in this city. I'm afraid I don't have a comment at this time, Miss Chen. Perhaps you should speak with Marcus directly. I have actually, he said, and I quote, Hartwell & Sons has dominated the market for too long. It's time for fresh blood and innovative thinking. Would you care to respond to that? I took a deep breath, measuring my words carefully. The only comment I'll make is this. Competition drives excellence. If Pinnacle developments can raise the bar, that's good for everyone, especially the city we both call home. After ending the call, I returned to the brochure, studying my son's face. There was something in his expression I hadn't seen before. A hunger, a determination that had been missing during all those years when he assumed his future was guaranteed. Later that week, I sat in the back row of the city council chamber, watching as Marcus presented Pinnacle's proposal for the Riverside project. He was polished, articulate, and surprisingly knowledgeable about construction specifications and zoning requirements. His presentation highlighted innovative, eco-friendly designs and community spaces that would make the development more than just another commercial property. It would be a destination. Pride swelled in my chest, despite the knowledge that his success might come at my company's expense. This was the Marcus I had always believed existed beneath the entitlement. Capable, intelligent, passionate. When it was Hartwell & Sons, turned to present, I slipped out quietly. I'd reviewed our proposal thoroughly the day before and had complete confidence in the team presenting it. Besides, I couldn't risk distracting them with my presence. This was their moment to shine as employee owners. The following day, as I sat in my office reviewing quarterly reports, James stopped by unannounced. "Have you spoken to Marcus?" he asked without preamble. "Not since the meeting 3 months ago," I replied, setting down my reading glasses. "Why?" "His attorney called me this morning. Apparently, he's struggling to secure financing for his first project. The banks are hesitant to back a new company with no track record, regardless of the Hartwell name." I leaned back in my chair, surprised by the conflicting emotions this news stirred within me. And what does he want from me? Money? "Not exactly," James said, settling into the chair across from me. "He wants a letter of recommendation. Something that would reassure potential investors of his capabilities." The irony wasn't lost on me. After walking away from my offer to earn his place in my company, Marcus was now asking for my endorsement to compete against me. "What did you tell his attorney?" "That I'd relay the request, but made no promises." James studied me carefully. "What are you thinking, Frank?" I stood and walked to the window, watching the construction crews on the building across the street. Men and women in hard hats and safety vests, working together to create something enduring. "I'm thinking about what Eleanor would want me to do," I said finally. "She always believed in second chances." "This isn't exactly a second chance," James pointed out. "It's more like he's asking you to help him take business away from your own company." "Is that what I'm doing? Or am I helping my son stand on his own 2 feet for the first time in his life?" James sighed. "Just be careful. This could be interpreted as a vote of no confidence in Hartwell & Sons." I nodded, understanding his concern. "I'll think about it overnight." That evening I drove to the cemetery where Eleanor was buried. It had become a habit over the years, visiting her grave when I faced difficult decisions, talking things through as if she were still beside me. The marble headstone gleamed in the soft glow of sunset as I placed fresh flowers in the small bronze vase. "Our son is trying to prove something, Ellie," I said, settling onto the small bench beside her grave. "He's finally showing initiative, drive, all the things we always hoped he would develop. But he's doing it to compete against me, not work alongside me." A gentle breeze rustled the leaves of the oak tree overhead, and I could almost hear Eleanor's pragmatic voice. At least he's doing something constructive with his anger. By morning, I had made my decision. I called Marcus's attorney and arranged a meeting, not at my office or with lawyers present, but at Eleanor's favorite cafe near the waterfront. To my surprise, Marcus agreed. When I arrived, he was already seated at a corner table, a laptop open before him. He closed it as I approached, his expression guarded. "Thank you for coming," I said, sliding into the chair across from him. "Your attorney made it sound important," he replied stiffly. I nodded to the waitress, who brought over 2 coffees, mine black and Marcus's with cream and 2 sugars, just as he'd always taken it. His eyebrow raised slightly at the fact that I still remembered. "I heard you're having trouble securing financing." I began, not one to dance around difficult subjects. His jaw tightened. "And you're here to gloat?" "No," I said calmly. "I'm here to understand what you're trying to build." Suspicion flickered across his features. "Why do you care?" "Because despite everything, you're still my son. And you're trying to make something of yourself without riding on my coattails. That deserves respect." The tension in his shoulders eased slightly. "I don't need your approval." "I know that. But you apparently need my endorsement with the banks." Marcus's eyes narrowed. "James shouldn't have told you that. Actually, he was doing his job. Protecting Hartwell and Sons' interests." I took a sip of my coffee. "Show me your business plan." "Excuse me?" "Your business plan," I repeated. "If you want my endorsement, I need to see that you actually know what you're doing." For a moment, I thought he might refuse out of pride. But then, with deliberate movements, he reopened his laptop and turned it toward me. For the next hour, Marcus walked me through his vision for Pinnacle developments, not just the Riverside project, but his 5-year strategy for carving out a niche in sustainable urban development. His numbers were solid, his market analysis thorough, and his designs innovative. It was clear he'd been paying more attention to my business over the years than I'd given him credit for. "You've done your homework," I acknowledged when he finished. "But there's a flaw in your financing structure." His expression hardened again. "I didn't ask for your criticism." "No, you asked for my endorsement. That means you get my honest assessment." I pointed to a section of his projected cash flow. "Your contingency reserve is too thin. One major setback. A delay in permitting. An unexpected environmental issue. A supply chain disruption. And you'll be underwater before you complete your first project." Marcus's instinct to dismiss my advice warred visibly with his recognition that I was right. Finally, he asked, "What would you suggest?" "Restructure your initial funding request. Ask for 15% more than you think you need and allocate it specifically to contingencies. It might mean giving up a slightly larger percentage to your investors, but it could save your company if things go sideways." He made notes, his brow furrowed in concentration. When he looked up again, some of the hostility had faded from his eyes. "Is that it?" "No," I said, meeting his gaze steadily. "Your fee structure for the Riverside project is too aggressive. You're undercutting the market to win the bid, but you haven't factored in potential cost overruns. It's a rookie mistake, one that could bankrupt you if you're not careful." A flush crept up his neck. "I can make it work." "Maybe, but is it worth the risk?" I pulled a folded document from my jacket pocket and placed it on the table between us. "This is the letter of recommendation you requested. I've endorsed your character, your intelligence, and your potential as a developer. I've confirmed that you grew up learning the business, even if it was by observation rather than direct participation." Marcus stared at the sealed envelope, conflict evident in his expression. "Why would you help me compete against your own company?" "Because competition makes us all better," I replied simply. "And because your mother would have wanted me to support you, even if you're choosing a different path than the one we hoped for." He reached for the envelope, then hesitated. "There's a but coming, isn't there?" I smiled faintly. "You know me well. Yes, there's a condition. I want quarterly lunch meetings, just you and me, no attorneys, no agenda. We talk about business, life, whatever comes up." "Why?" he asked, genuine confusion replacing his suspicion. "Because you're still my son, Marcus, and I've missed you these past 3 months." Something shifted in his eyes, a softening around the edges that reminded me of the boy who used to follow me around job sites, asking endless questions about how buildings stood up and why we use certain materials instead of others. "What about the Riverside project?" he asked. "If we're both still bidding, may the best proposal win," I said firmly. "No favors, no handicaps. If Pinnacle gets the contract, it will be because you earned it. If Hartwell and Sons wins, it will be because our employee owners brought their best work to the table." Marcus considered this for a long moment before extending his hand across the table. "Deal." As we shook hands, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. Not the burden of giving away my company, but the heavier burden of watching my son drift away from the values that had shaped my life's work. 2 weeks later, the city council announced their decision on the Riverside project. I sat in the chamber, surrounded by Hartwell and Sons employees, as the council president stepped up to the microphone. After careful consideration of all proposals, the city has decided to award the Riverside development contract to Hartwell and Sons. A cheer erupted around me, colleagues patting each other on the back and exchanging high fives. My eyes, however, sought out Marcus, seated across the aisle with his small team. His disappointment was evident, but there was something else in his expression too, a resolve, a determination that told me this setback would only fuel his drive. As the crowd began to disperse, I made my way over to him. "Your proposal was excellent," I said sincerely, "especially for a first attempt." He nodded, accepting the compliment with unexpected grace. "Yours was better. The community garden on the rooftop, that was inspired." "Actually, that was Andrea's idea," I said, nodding toward one of our younger architects. "She's been with us for 3 years, started as an intern. She's going to run the company someday." Marcus studied the young woman thoughtfully. "She reminds me of Mom, that same practical creativity." "I thought the same thing," I admitted, surprised by this moment of connection. "Are we still on for lunch next week?" For the first time since our confrontation months ago, Marcus smiled, a genuine smile that reached his eyes. "I'll be there. I have some revisions to my business plan I'd like your opinion on." As I watched him walk away, head held high despite the defeat, I felt a surge of hope. Perhaps in losing his expected inheritance, Marcus had found something far more valuable, the drive to create his own legacy, built on hard work rather than entitlement. And perhaps, in giving him what he hadn't expected instead of what he'd demanded, I had finally given my son the gift he truly needed. The seasons had shifted from summer to fall, painting Portland in hues of amber and crimson, as Marcus and I settled into our unusual arrangement. Our weekly lunches had evolved from stilted conversations filled with careful politeness to genuine exchanges about business strategy, market trends, and occasionally, more personal matters. Today marked our 6th meeting, and as I waited at our usual corner table at Riverside Bistro, I reflected on the unexpected journey of the past 6 months. Marcus arrived precisely on time, as had become his habit. Gone was the fashionable lateness he had once cultivated, replaced by a punctuality that spoke of his growing respect for both his time and mine. He wore a casual blazer over a simple button-down shirt, practical business attire rather than the ostentatious suits he'd favored before. "Sorry if I kept you waiting," he said, sliding into the chair across from me. "Traffic on the bridge was backed up. Just got here myself," I replied, though we both knew I always arrived 15 minutes early, a habit formed over decades in an industry where tardiness could cost thousands. The waitress brought our usual orders without having to ask my club sandwich and his Cobb salad. It was a small thing, this predictability, but it had become a comfortable ritual that framed our conversations. "I closed on the Hawthorne Street property yesterday," Marcus announced, a hint of pride softening his usually guarded expression. "The environmental assessment came back clean, and we're set to break ground next month." "Congratulations," I said sincerely. "That's a challenging location with the slope and the water table issues." He nodded, cutting into his salad with precision. "We're bringing in a specialized engineering firm from Seattle to handle the foundation work. It's adding 10% to the budget, but it's worth it for the peace of mind." I couldn't help but smile. 6 months ago, Marcus would have cut corners to save costs, confident that problems could be fixed later. Now he was making the kinds of decisions that reflected a deeper understanding of what it meant to build something that would last. "Smart move," I acknowledged. "Better to spend the money up front than deal with structural issues 5 years down the road." We ate in companionable silence for a few minutes before Marcus cleared his throat, setting down his fork. "I've been meaning to ask you something." "Go ahead," I encouraged, sensing his hesitation. "Why did you really give me that recommendation letter?" "You had to know it would help me establish Pinnacle as a legitimate competitor." I considered my answer carefully, wanting to be honest without reopening old wounds. 2 reasons, I said finally. First, because I believed you had the potential to succeed if given the chance to stand on your own merits. And second, because I wanted to be your father again, not just the gatekeeper to what you thought you deserved. Marcus absorbed this, his expression thoughtful. I was so angry when you converted the company to employee ownership. I felt like you'd stolen something from me. I know, I said quietly. But I didn't do it to punish you, Marcus. I did it because it was the right thing for the company and for the people who'd helped build it. Your mother and I discussed it extensively before she passed. His head snapped up, surprise evident in his eyes. Mom knew about this? It was partly her idea, I admitted, watching as this new information shifted something fundamental in his understanding. She worried that handing you everything would rob you of the chance to discover your own strength. She used to say that the greatest disservice a parent can do is to clear every obstacle from their child's path. A shadow of emotion crossed his face. Not anger this time, but something more complex. I always thought she would have wanted you to keep the company in the family. She did, I replied. But her definition of family was broader than blood. It included everyone who poured their heart and soul into building Hartwell & Sons. Marcus fell silent, processing this revelation. When he spoke again, his voice carried a new humility. I've been thinking about what you said at our first lunch, about my contingency reserves being too thin. You were right. We hit an unexpected issue with the city permits on the Hawthorne project, and if I hadn't restructured the financing like you suggested, we'd be in serious trouble right now. Construction is a business of problems, I said, echoing the words my own father had once shared with me. Success isn't about avoiding them. It's about anticipating them and having the resources to solve them when they inevitably arise. As our lunch concluded and we prepared to return to our respective companies, Marcus hesitated by the table, an unusual uncertainty in his posture. Dad, there's something else I wanted to discuss with you. Pinnacle has been approached about a joint venture opportunity, a major retail and residential development on the east side. The client specifically wants a combination of our innovative design approach and Hartwell's proven construction management expertise. I raised an eyebrow, genuinely surprised by this turn of events. A partnership? Between Pinnacle and Hartwell & Sons? More of a strategic collaboration, he clarified. Each company would maintain its independence, but we'd bring our respective strengths to the table for this specific project. The proposal was unexpected, but not unwelcome. I'd need to discuss it with the board, I said carefully. As you know, I don't make unilateral decisions anymore. Of course, he nodded, handing me a folder containing the preliminary details. Take your time. The client isn't expecting an answer until next month. As we parted ways outside the restaurant, I found myself reflecting on how far we'd come from that confrontational meeting 6 months ago. Marcus was no longer demanding what he thought he deserved. He was proposing a collaboration of equals, recognizing both his strengths and limitations. The following morning, I convened a special meeting of the Hartwell & Sons Board of Directors, a diverse group comprising senior management, long-term employees, and 2 independent advisors. As I presented Marcus's proposal, I was careful to remain neutral, emphasizing the potential benefits while acknowledging the unusual nature of partnering with what had been, until now, a direct competitor. Frankly, I'm torn, admitted Gabriela Reyes, our operations director, and a 20-year veteran of the company. On one hand, Pinnacle has secured some impressive design contracts. Their sustainability approach could complement our traditional strengths. On the other hand, can we trust that this isn't some kind of Trojan horse strategy? Robert Chen, our chief financial officer, tapped his pen thoughtfully against his notepad. I've reviewed their financials. What's publicly available anyway? They're running lean but solid. The bigger question is whether our teams can work together effectively, given the personal history involved. All eyes turned to me, and I realized they were worried about more than just business compatibility. They were concerned about how a partnership would affect the complicated relationship between Marcus and me. I appreciate your concern, I said, meeting each gaze around the table, but I want to assure you that my personal relationship with Marcus won't cloud my judgment on what's best for Hartwell & Sons. That's precisely why I'm bringing this to the board, rather than making the decision myself. Andrea Sullivan, the young architect whose rooftop garden design had helped secure the Riverside project, spoke up next. "I think we should consider it," she said, her quiet confidence drawing everyone's attention. "I've been studying Pinnacle's designs. They're taking risks we've been hesitant to try, particularly in sustainable materials and energy systems. We could learn from them, just as they could benefit from our project management expertise." The discussion continued for nearly 2 hours, dissecting every aspect of the potential collaboration, financial implications, team dynamics, client expectations, and long-term strategic considerations. By the time we adjourned, a consensus had emerged. We would explore the partnership, but with clear boundaries and expectations documented in a formal agreement. As the room emptied, Andrea lingered behind, approaching me with the same thoughtful determination that had first caught my attention when she joined the company. "Mr. Hartwell, may I speak frankly?" "Always," I assured her, gathering my notes. "I think this collaboration could be transformative, not just for the companies, but for your relationship with Marcus." She paused, choosing her words carefully. "I've seen how you light up when you mention the progress he's making with Pinnacle. This could be a chance to work together as equals, to share the knowledge you've accumulated over decades in a context where he's receptive to learning." Her insight struck me deeply. "When did you get so wise about family dynamics, Andrea?" She smiled wryly. "My father and I didn't speak for 5 years after I chose architecture over joining his accounting firm. We only reconnected when we found ourselves working on the same commercial project. Me designing, him handling the financials. Sometimes it's easier to rebuild relationships when you're building something tangible together." The following week, I invited Marcus to Hartwell & Sons headquarters to discuss the board's decision. As he walked through the building, I noticed employees greeting him with cordial nods rather than the wary glances they'd given him during his previous visits. Word of the potential collaboration had spread, and curiosity had replaced suspicion. In the conference room, I laid out the board's conditions: a clearly defined project scope, transparent communication protocols, joint risk management, and a dispute resolution framework that would prevent any personal conflicts from derailing the project. "These are reasonable terms," Marcus acknowledged, reviewing the document. "My team had similar concerns about keeping the business relationship separate from our personal history." "Speaking of your team," I said, "I'd like to meet them before we finalize anything. If we're going to work together, I want to understand the people you've surrounded yourself with." 2 days later, I found myself in Pinnacle's modest offices, housed in a renovated warehouse in the city's emerging design district. The space was open and vibrant, with exposed brick walls, concrete floors, and large windows that flooded the area with natural light. Architectural models and material samples were displayed prominently, creating an atmosphere of creative energy. Marcus introduced me to his core team, Sophia, his chief architect, whose previous work included award-winning sustainable housing projects; Derek, a finance expert who had specialized in green investment; Tara, his project manager, who had extensive experience in urban renewal initiatives; and several younger designers and engineers who brought fresh perspectives to traditional challenges. What struck me most was the genuine respect with which they spoke to Marcus. This wasn't the deference of employees afraid to contradict the boss's son. It was the collaborative engagement of professionals who valued each other's expertise. Marcus listened more than he spoke, asked thoughtful questions, and readily acknowledged when someone else's approach improved upon his initial ideas. This was a side of my son I had never seen, or perhaps had never given him the opportunity to develop. In building his own company from scratch, with the limited resources of his inheritance rather than the abundant wealth of a gifted empire, Marcus had discovered qualities within himself that might otherwise have remained dormant. As the meeting concluded and we prepared to sign the preliminary agreement for the joint venture, Marcus pulled me aside into his small but tidy office. "Before we make this official," he said, closing the door, "there's something I need to say." I braced myself, uncertain whether to expect a last-minute negotiation tactic or perhaps a renewed expression of the resentment that had simmered beneath our recent civility. Instead, Marcus reached into his desk drawer and pulled out a faded photograph, one I recognized immediately. It showed him at age 12, standing proudly beside me at the groundbreaking ceremony for the Hartwell Building, our company's first major commercial development. We were both holding shovels, grinning at the camera as if we shared a wonderful secret. "I found this while cleaning out some old boxes," he said, his voice softening. "Do you remember what you told me that day?" I nodded, the memory vivid despite the passage of 23 years. I said that someday we'd build something together that would change the skyline of this city. For years I assumed that meant I'd eventually take over Hartwell & Sons, Marcus continued. I never considered that we might fulfill that promise in a different way. He placed the photograph on the desk between us. I was angry for so long, convinced that you'd betrayed me by not handing over what I thought was my birthright. But these past 6 months, building Pinnacle from nothing, making my own mistakes and learning from them, it's changed me. I've noticed, I said quietly. What I'm trying to say is... He hesitated, struggling with words that didn't come easily to him. Thank you for not giving me what I demanded, for giving me what I needed instead. The simplicity of this acknowledgement caught me off guard, and I found myself momentarily speechless. After a moment, I responded with equal honesty. I didn't know if it was the right decision, Marcus. I just knew I couldn't bear to watch you become someone who believed they deserved success without earning it. He extended his hand across the desk, and as we shook to seal our agreement, both the business partnership and something more personal, I felt a weight lift that I hadn't even realized I'd been carrying. The joint venture launched the following month with a public announcement that generated significant interest in Portland's business community. The East Side Renaissance Project, as it came to be known, would transform a neglected industrial area into a vibrant mixed-use development, featuring affordable housing, retail spaces, a community center, and extensive green infrastructure. What neither the press release nor the glossy renderings could capture, however, was the profound shift that had occurred between a father and son, who had found their way back to each other not through the easy path of inherited privilege, but through the more meaningful journey of mutual respect earned through separate accomplishments. As we stood side by side at the project's groundbreaking ceremony, shovels in hand and an echo of that long-ago photograph, I realized that Eleanor had been right all along. The greatest gift I could have given our son wasn't a company handed to him on a silver platter. It was the opportunity to discover his own capacity to build something meaningful with his own 2 hands. And in that discovery, he had also found his way home. The East Side Renaissance Project broke ground on a crisp autumn morning, with city officials, community leaders, and the combined teams of Hartwell & Sons and Pinnacle Developments gathered at the site. As bulldozers prepared to transform the abandoned industrial landscape, I couldn't help but reflect on how much had changed in the years since Marcus had first demanded his inheritance. What had begun as a painful confrontation had evolved into something neither of us could have anticipated, a genuine partnership built on mutual respect rather than obligation. The joint venture rapidly became the talk of Portland's business community. Architectural Digest featured our innovative approach to sustainable urban redevelopment, highlighting the seamless integration of Pinnacle's cutting-edge design philosophy with Hartwell's proven construction expertise. Local news outlets praised the project's commitment to affordable housing and community spaces, noting how unusual it was for luxury and accessibility to coexist so harmoniously in modern development. What the press didn't capture, what they couldn't know, was the profound personal transformation unfolding behind the headlines. Our weekly business lunches had expanded to include occasional dinners, sometimes with our respective teams, sometimes just the 2 of us. The stilted conversations of those early meetings had given way to genuine exchanges about everything from market trends to memories of Eleanor that we'd both treasured but never shared. 6 months into construction, as winter yielded to a cautiously optimistic spring, Marcus invited me to Pinnacle's offices for what he described as an important discussion. When I arrived, I found him in the conference room, surrounded by architectural models, material samples, and large-format renderings pinned to every available wall space. "You've been busy," I observed, taking in the impressive display. "We're pitching for the Hillside Medical Campus next month," he explained, gesturing to the centerpiece model, an elegant complex of interconnected buildings that seemed to flow with the natural topography rather than imposing upon it. It would be Pinnacle's largest project to date. I studied the model with genuine admiration. The integration with the landscape is remarkable. Reminds me of your mother's approach to gardening, working with nature rather than against it. A smile touched his lips. That was intentional, actually. I've been thinking a lot about Mom lately, about what she valued, what she tried to teach me that I was too stubborn to hear. He moved to a covered easel in the corner, his expression suddenly serious. "That's actually why I asked you here today. I've been working on something. A proposal that goes beyond our current collaboration." With a gesture that reminded me of Eleanor's theatrical flair whenever she revealed one of her garden transformations, Marcus pulled away the cloth covering the easel. Beneath it was a meticulously rendered organizational chart that caused my breath to catch in my throat. At the top was a new name, Hartwell Legacy Group, with 2 divisions flowing beneath it, Hartwell & Sons Construction and Pinnacle Developments. "Before you say anything," Marcus began, his voice carefully measured, "this isn't what you think. I'm not asking to merge our companies or trying to create a back door to what I once demanded." He handed me a bound proposal that outlined his vision, a parent company that would serve as an umbrella for both existing organizations, preserving their independent operations while creating opportunities for strategic collaboration when beneficial. Both companies would maintain their current ownership structures, he explained as I flipped through the pages. Hartwell & Sons would remain employee-owned, with no change to the equity distribution you've established. Pinnacle would continue as my enterprise. But together, under the Legacy Group, we could pursue larger projects, share certain resources to reduce overhead, and present a unified front in competitive bids when appropriate. I sat down, taking time to absorb the details of his proposal. It was thoughtfully constructed, addressing potential concerns before they could be raised, with clear benefits for both organizations. Most surprisingly, it included provisions for a foundation that would fund construction training programs for disadvantaged youth, something Eleanor had always advocated for, but we'd never implemented at scale. "The name," I said finally, "Hartwell Legacy Group, not Pinnacle Hartwell or some new corporate identity." Marcus nodded, a hint of vulnerability breaking through his professional demeanor. "It's still your legacy, Dad. I just want to be part of building it, not taking it over." "And the foundation?" I asked, tapping the section dedicated to the educational initiative. "Mom's influence," he admitted. She used to talk about how the industry needed to open doors for kids who might never see construction or architecture as viable career paths. I thought it was fitting to make that a cornerstone of the new structure. I closed the proposal, studying my son's face, the determination in his eyes balanced by a new humility that had been absent a year ago. "This would need board approval from Hartwell & Sons. It's not my decision alone anymore." "I know," he said. "That's why I wanted to discuss it with you privately first. If you don't think it has merit, I'll set it aside and we can continue as we are." What struck me most wasn't just the business acumen evident in the proposal, but the emotional intelligence behind the approach, the recognition that this needed to be a collective decision, not something imposed by birthright or demanded as entitlement. "I think it deserves serious consideration," I said finally. "Let me present it to the board and get their initial reactions." The relief in his expression was palpable. "That's all I'm asking for." The board meeting that followed a week later stretched long into the evening. Questions were raised, concerns voiced, scenarios analyzed from every angle. Some worried about cultural integration, others about potential power struggles down the road. A few expressed skepticism about Marcus's motives, wondering if this was simply a longer-term strategy to eventually control both companies. Andrea Sullivan, who had recently been promoted to creative director, was the first to speak in favor of the proposal. "I've worked directly with the Pinnacle team on East Side Renaissance," she reminded the group. "Their values align with ours more than any other firm we've collaborated with. And honestly, their innovative approach pushes us to be better." Robert Chen, our typically cautious CFO, added his support after meticulously reviewing the financial projections. "The economies of scale make sense, particularly for insurance, benefits, and certain administrative functions. We could reinvest those savings into employee development and project innovation." The discussion continued, with valid points on both sides. When it came time to vote, I deliberately abstained, wanting the decision to reflect the true consensus of the employee owners rather than being influenced by my personal relationship with Marcus. The result was closer than I expected: 7 in favor, 5 opposed, with 3 abstentions including my own. Close enough to warrant further discussion and refinement, but sufficient to move forward with exploring the structure in more detail. When I called Marcus to relay the outcome, his response surprised me. "I want to meet with the board members who opposed it," he said without hesitation. not to change their minds, but to understand their concerns. If this is going to work, we need to address reservations openly, not steamroll over them. That moment, perhaps more than any other in our journey, confirmed how profoundly Marcus had changed. The entitled young man who had once demanded his inheritance as a birthright was now willing to earn trust through patient dialogue and genuine respect for others' perspectives. Over the following weeks, Marcus met individually with each of the dissenting board members. He listened more than he spoke, took copious notes, and incorporated their feedback into a revised proposal that addressed many of their concerns. He added safeguards against future consolidation, clarified decision-making protocols to prevent deadlocks, and strengthened the independence of both operating companies. By the time the final vote came 2 months later, the tally had shifted to 11 in favor, 3 opposed, with 1 abstention. The Hartwell Legacy Group would become a reality, not through inheritance or demand, but through collaboration and earned respect. The formal announcement was made at a joint company gathering on what would have been Eleanor's 70th birthday, a timing that felt both poignant and appropriate. The venue was the community center we had built as part of the East Side Renaissance, its walls adorned with photographs documenting both companies' histories. As I stood at the podium looking out at the combined teams, the weathered faces of Hartwell veterans alongside Pinnacle's young innovators, I felt a sense of rightness that transcended business strategy. This wasn't just a corporate restructuring, it was the healing of a family wound that had festered far too long. Eleanor used to say that buildings are just structures until people fill them with purpose. I began, my voice steadier than I expected. The same could be said of companies. Hartwell & Sons and Pinnacle Developments are more than legal entities or balance sheets. They're communities of people committed to creating spaces where others can live, work, and thrive. I gestured to the wall behind me, where a portrait of Eleanor now hung beside the architectural renderings of our joint projects. The Hartwell Legacy Group honors not just a family name, but a philosophy that what we build should outlast us, should serve generations we will never meet, should stand as testament to values that transcend profit margins. Marcus joined me at the podium, the symbolic transfer of leadership evident in our shared space. A year ago, he admitted to the gathered employees, "I thought legacy was something you inherit, like a watch or a piece of furniture." I demanded what I thought was owed to me without understanding that true legacy isn't passed down. It's built up, one decision, one project, one relationship at a time. The sincerity in his voice reached even the most skeptical faces in the crowd. This wasn't corporate spin or rehearsed humility. It was the hard-earned wisdom of someone who had nearly lost everything important by focusing on the wrong definition of success. The official merger took effect the following quarter, with minimal disruption to ongoing projects. The East Side Renaissance was completed 3 weeks ahead of schedule and 5% under budget, a testament to the synergy between our teams. The medical campus bid that Pinnacle had been preparing was submitted under the Hartwell Legacy Group banner, and ultimately secured, becoming our first major project as a unified entity. But the most significant change wasn't visible on any balance sheet or corporate filing. It was the transformation in Marcus himself, from a man who measured his worth by what he owned to one who found fulfillment in what he created alongside others. One evening, nearly 2 years after that fateful meeting where he had demanded his inheritance, Marcus invited me to dinner at his new home, a modest craftsman bungalow he had renovated himself on weekends, learning carpentry skills he had once considered beneath his dignity. As we sat on his back deck watching the sunset paint the sky in shades that reminded me of Eleanor's favorite roses, Marcus handed me a small wooden box, hand-carved with intricate geometric patterns. "I made this," he said simply, "first attempt at fine woodworking." I opened it carefully, finding inside a set of keys and a folded document. The keys were unfamiliar, but the document bore the Hartwell Legacy Group letterhead. "What's this?" I asked, unfolding the paper. "Deed to a property on Lake Oswego," he explained. "The Foundation's first major initiative, a training center for young people interested in construction and design careers. We break ground next month." I studied the architectural rendering attached to the deed, a beautiful campus nestled among trees, with workshop spaces, classrooms, and a central courtyard featuring a bronze sculpture that looked remarkably like Eleanor's profile. "The Eleanor Hartwell Center for Building Arts," I read aloud, emotion tightening my throat. "The inheritance I demanded would have given me control of something I didn't build," Marcus said quietly. "But this creating something that will outlast both of us, that will open doors for kids who might otherwise never get the chance. This feels like the legacy Mom would have wanted us to build together. In that moment, I realized that the greatest inheritance I could have given my son wasn't the company or the wealth it had generated, but the values that had guided its creation: integrity, perseverance, vision, and the understanding that true worth isn't measured by what you own, but by what you contribute. The center opened 18 months later, welcoming its first cohort of 30 students from diverse backgrounds across the city. Marcus taught a weekly seminar on sustainable design principles while I mentored a small group in project management fundamentals. Several Hartwell employee owners volunteered as instructors, sharing decades of accumulated knowledge with eager young minds. On graduation day, as we watched the first class receive their certificates, Marcus leaned over and whispered, "This is what it means to be rich, isn't it? Not having everything handed to you, but having something meaningful to hand to others." I nodded, unable to speak past the lump in my throat. The son who had once demanded his inheritance had discovered something far more valuable than wealth or ownership. He had found purpose, connection, and the profound satisfaction that comes from earning rather than taking. As we stood together afterward, shaking hands with graduates and their proud families, I caught sight of our reflection in the center's glass facade. Father and son, different in many ways, but united by a shared vision that transcended the material. The inheritance Marcus had demanded was nothing compared to what he had ultimately received. Not a company handed down, but the opportunity to build something of his own, alongside people who respected him for his contribution rather than his last name. And in giving him what he needed rather than what he wanted, I had received an unexpected gift in return: the joy of watching my son become not just a successful businessman, but a man of substance, integrity, and genuine purpose. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.